But Ukraine's foreign minister has urged Russia to agree unconditionally to a 30-day ceasefire to show it really wants peace. His comments came ahead of a phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, who are reported to be speaking about now. The ceasefire in Ukraine is the focus of that much-anticipated phone call between the two presidents, who are speaking about which side gets what in any peace deal. A Kremlin spokesman said that additionally, the two leaders would be discussing the normalization of bilateral relations.
At the G7, the UK and our allies were united in our unwavering support for Ukraine's defence of its freedom, united in support for Ukraine's pursuit of peace, united on what is required to make this happen. Now it is Putin who stands in the spotlight. Putin who must answer. Putin who must choose. Are you serious, Mr. Putin, about peace? Will you stop the fighting? Or will you drag your feet and play games? Play lip service to a ceasefire while still pummeling Ukraine? My warning to Mr. Putin is this: if you are serious, prove it with a full and unconditional ceasefire now. And if Putin does not deliver, Mr. Speaker, and I must tell the House that I currently see no sign yet that he is, the G7 meeting helped us ready the tools to get Russia to negotiate seriously. We're not waiting for the Kremlin. If they reject a ceasefire, we have more cards that we can play. We can all see the impact the G7's unprecedented sanctions have had on Russia's faltering economy. Social spending down, inflation and interest rates sky high. There can be no let-up in our efforts. In Canada, we discussed where we can go further to target their energy and defence sectors, further squeeze their oil revenues and use frozen Russian assets.
And that's the British Foreign Secretary there, David Lammy. Well, for his assessment, I'm joined now on the line from London by the International Affairs Analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz. It was a bit of a challenge getting through to you, but there you are. President Trump has said that many elements of that peace agreement have already been agreed with Vladimir Putin even before today's phone conversation. Is it clear to you what has been agreed and what any ceasefire as a consequence may look like?
Well, there are some signs. First and foremost, it is as ever the quiet conversations behind the scenes which are the most important. And in a sense, the telephone call between the two presidents is nothing more than simply a confirmation of what has already been decided elsewhere. Secondly, it is quite clear that Donald Trump is very keen on a peace at Ukraine's expense. Ukraine will be expected to cede territory. Thirdly, he is still keen on the minerals deal, and this is where this enigmatic power plant comment of his comes in, because any minerals coming from Ukraine require a vast amount of power to process them, and it's the power plant currently in Russian hands, the nuclear one, which is supposed to be able to process them with cheap electricity. And that's the meaning of that comment. For his part, President Putin has made it quite clear Ukraine cannot be in NATO, cannot have any peacekeeping forces from the West, which as far as the Russians are concerned, are NATO in a different guise. And then he wants to keep all the territories occupied and a little bit more besides, which he also claims is part of Russia. In this point of view, this decision made by those two presidents over the head of Ukraine is what we must, I think, most likely expect will emerge from this telephone call.
And you mentioned the rather pivotal issue of peacekeepers, pivotal both for Russia and Ukraine, and they are, of course, on opposite sides about whether there should be peacekeepers or not. Where do you think the Trump administration is likely to fall on that?
I think they're going to find the peacekeeping troops irrelevant, and they're not going to press for them. From their point of view, they've already been disdainful of the countries like Great Britain and France providing troops, and so therefore they're not going to see this as a serious issue. They're just going to let it go.
And President Trump has spoken about he and President Putin talking about dividing certain assets. That is likely to unnerve many people in Ukraine who fear being locked out of any permanent agreement. I mean, do you think those fears in Kyiv are well founded?
Yes, it's quite clear President Trump has an agenda, the minerals deal to recover the money that America has spent on this war, a ceasefire at whatever cost to Ukraine, coûte, as the French would say, and what Ukrainian views on this point are irrelevant. If Ukraine were to fight on, it would be without American help, and America would be clean out of any financial obligations, whether it be in money or in blood. And so therefore, yes, the Ukrainians are having, if you like, their fate settled above their heads, which is incidentally by no means the first time this has happened to Ukraine, which throughout its history has been partitioned between Russia, Turkey, Poland, to name the three biggest nations involved historically. And now it is yet another partition of sorts, because it's almost certain that the assets, mineral assets, which are in the Russian hands, which were Ukrainian occupied territory, will in fact are also part of this discussion. And I think that's what he means by dividing up assets.
And what do you think of the view that if Russia is allowed to keep anything that is regarded internationally as Ukrainian, it would be seen as a win for Russia and would embolden those states who fancy taking a bit of another nation? And I'm kind of thinking of one of the issues you might or might not have raised in one of your numerous books.
Yes, the key problem here is, in politics, image is so important. And what has happened is America is actually presenting the deal in Russian terms, that this is a Ukraine ceding territory. There is a way out via a compromise, but it is not being taken. That's what I said in one of my books. Instead, what we're seeing is what will de facto be a Russian victory, and presented as such, which will embolden Russia for a start, because it means they can go ahead. They have claims in other areas as well. But of course, in that sense, America herself has claims in the Panama Canal, Greenland, and Canada, so it would embolden them. And of course, there's no obvious reason why China, for its part, shouldn't do something about Taiwan finally. The point about it is, once aggression is seen to pay, please note what I've said, because were it to be presented differently, there will be a different approach. But as it stands, how it is being presented as a victory for Russia, then there's no obvious reasons why other nations can't do the same. And this even goes as far as the Gaza Strip and the plans there.
So clearly this is a pivotal moment for Mr. Trump to try and get Mr. Putin to agree to a ceasefire. What do you think of the view, or what do you think if there is no agreement between Presidents Trump and Putin today? Well, what do you think the US does next? I mean, does it ramp up support for Ukraine to pressure Russia militarily?
It all depends what you mean by no agreement. If you mean they carry on negotiating to finalize the clauses and dot the I's and cross the T's, then it'll simply be that, another few more weeks by which they talk more and Russia conquers yet more territory. So that won't be a problem for USA or for Russia, just a problem for Ukraine. The aspect of the Russians simply turning down USA proposals flat and refusing to negotiate further, that indeed would put USA on a spot, because USA has threatened in the past to ramp up problems for Russia, primarily in the economic field. However, there's no evidence of that. On the contrary, all the quiet discussions are pointing to a normalization of the relations, a normalization of trade. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest to say that the sanctions on Russia by America would simply evaporate away. And in that respect, I would expect the talks to carry on for some time in any case, because it's unlike the Russians to simply agree to something point blank like this straight away. I think this phone call is simply one of several that will occur, because the Russians simply don't rush these things.
So we've got less than a minute to go. Just very briefly, do you think any announcement of a ceasefire deal today is likely?
Personally, I don't think it will be announced as a ceasefire deal. It will simply be announced that more work has been done towards a ceasefire deal and that progress was good, and in all respects, the relations between America and Russia are improving. That's what I expect.
Thank you very much indeed on that interesting note. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me on the line from London.